Unlike Zach Wilson, I came to play. Hello and welcome into Monday Mayhem, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, jokers of all ages. This is the show where everything's made up and the points really do matter. It's my weekly reaction show. So first thing right off the bat, I'm going to make a special announcement. Starting next week and through at least the fantasy playoffs, Monday Mayhem and Thursday Thriller are officially moving to live schedules. We're going to be coming in Mondays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, live every single week. I'm going to do all the rest of my pre-recordings around that schedule from now on. The Sunday live streams early in the morning are still going to be there. I might even push those a little bit later in the morning to be a little more helpful for people with the playoffs on the line and everything. But at least for the next couple of weeks, starting after this week and starting this Thursday officially, Monday Mayhem, Thursday Thriller. From now on, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can join live, drop comments, engage with me and the show. I finally figured out like how to run comments and stuff. So we'll incorporate that into the show going forward. You guys can ask questions. And, you know, in between segments, I'll do my best to answer them, or I'll do Q&As at the end of the shows. But bottom line, I want to be there for people and maybe help grow this thing a little bit with the fantasy playoffs coming. So I've got also a playoff primer episode in mind that I will do either this week or next week. But yeah, we're going to get right into it. Starting, as always, fantasy receipts. Shout out to you guys. We always start off with, what did I get wrong?
I'm stupid. You're smart. I was wrong. You were right. You're the best. I'm the worst. You're very good looking. I'm not attractive.
All right. As long as you're willing to admit that.
So more on like a season-long perspective, I don't know what's going on with the Chargers offense and specifically Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator. And this will play into, and I've mentioned it previously on other shows, I've already bit the bullet and admitted and that I was wrong and eaten crow about Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer and the Cowboys offense, especially as of late. The Cowboys offense is humming. Mike McCarthy is calling plays and looking very confident on the sidelines. Meanwhile, with the Chargers, it's been the complete opposite. Kellen Moore and this offense run by Justin Herbert look absolutely lost. Now, I understand the Patriots are still a good defense with Bill Belichick, especially at home, but 6 fucking points in this game. Like, Austin Eckler has to have something wrong with him, or he's running with bricks in his pockets. Like, this man's running with anchors on his shoes. I don't know what's up with Austin Eckler, but you know, he looks awful, and he and Keenan Allen, you know, is banged up too now, and that's it. It's between them, and you know, nothing else is working. Quentin Johnston is stumbling, bumbling balls out there. None of the other auxiliary options that they've drafted over the years, whether it is a Joshua Palmer or Jalen Guyton, none of these wide receiver 2s or 3s have panned out for them. And, you know, even in the tight end room, you look at, you know, their best option is Gerald Everett, who never really hit with the Seahawks and has never really hit with the Chargers either. They may as well have kept Hunter Henry, who hasn't done much of anything with the Patriots. So I think just in general, I was really wrong about the perspectives of the Chargers offense, and obviously the limitations of the Cowboys offense as well. And so I've already eaten crow on the Cowboys, but man, the Chargers have been fucking hard to watch as of late. The other really big thing I was wrong about, and this was, I guess, more on a personal level, was Trey McBride. Just, with the Cardinals offense, multiple weather delays, and just everything going on, I was not expecting him to have such a huge game. I was actually more projecting like a 5 for 40. And so I had him as a really good tight end play. That wasn't the question for a lot of my teams, though. A lot of the situations I was in was, would I play him as a flex option? So, for example, in Scott Fishbowl, I ended up playing. Now, I could have taken Achane, put him in the running back spot over Devin Singletary, which is what I should have done, and played Trey McBride in the flex over Singletary in a tight end premium league. That would have been the right move. Now, I still, very luckily, the rest of my team popped off. I won the matchup. So I've taken down the 1 and 2 seed in my division the last 2 weeks concurrently, and I have advanced in the Scott Fishbowl playoffs. It is my first time in Scott Fishbowl, so I'm excited to be advancing in the playoffs. We'll see if we can keep it going next week, because it looks like we got a couple guys banged up, and now Trey McBride, who just popped off, he's going to be on a bye week. But if we can survive it, I like the way my team is set up for down the stretch. We lose Christian Watson, but Jordan Love is playing out of his mind right now, so I still have him in Superflex, and I have some replacement options for wide receiver and tight ends and that kind of thing. I've got a couple. I've even still got Evan Ingram going tonight, and my team's already put up just under 250 points. So I'm feeling confident, feeling good, but I benched Trey McBride in a lot of leagues because it was deciding on if I want to put him in the flex. There was one league where begrudgingly I didn't put him in my tight end spot when I probably should have, but that team was dog shit and would have lost anyway, so it really did not matter. And that team's out of the playoffs anyways. It's just, one of the ones that got away from me. It's the faux pas of when you have like 20 leagues to manage, which now I'm down to 17 active, and now if I lose that one, so we're going to be down to like, assumedly with like what's going to be making the playoffs, I should have about a dozen to 15 still active leagues heading into this last week of the regular season, and then we'll see how many of those make the playoffs. And then how many of those are still active leagues. We should be getting down to the nitty gritty pretty soon. And it's felt like a rough fucking year. Like I've rarely felt it in fantasy football. Usually it's fantasy hockey and basketball because the seasons are longer and there's so many more games that at a certain point towards the end, I start to feel like I'm ready to just tap out and take a break from fantasy in general. But this year I felt it with fantasy football. Maybe it's because I'm also, doing the content for the first year, but no, I feel like it's just because I'm beleaguered with all these fucking injuries and just having to manage so many teams. And so I think cutting down is definitely going to be in line for me next year. The other thing I would say that I was really wrong about is just the Denver-Houston matchup in general. It only hit 39 points. I don't know what the over-under was. I assume that would be either under or just barely over whatever the spread was. But I would have had the over by a lot. The Broncos defense has been much better, and you have to ignore people still are relying on the fantasy ranking of, Denver's ranked 32nd against the run, 31st against the run. Look, Dameon Pierce got the touchdown. If it wasn't for that, the running backs, Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, combined for 23 carries and only 77 yards. The Broncos defense has been much better as of late. You can't just blindly stream your running backs against them. That ranking is extremely tilted because of that one Dolphins matchup where they got eviscerated by Achane and Mostert. So that one game is tilting all of their fantasy rankings on defense to a degree in terms of streaming matchups. So you have to kind of, know that in real life, they've been playing better the last few weeks on defense, and you can't just, blindly start your running backs against them, especially if it's more of an auxiliary option like a Devin Singletary, who, I tried to play because of thinking, okay, well, maybe the matchup is still there and maybe they do end up running the ball more, and it still wasn't there. So if you're looking at like these secondary options to play against the Broncos, it might not be there for a streaming matchup. And before we get into my favorite segment of Monday Mayhem, we'll get into what I got right this week.
Say I told her so, but you know what? I told her so. I told her so.
So, repeat from last week. Jordan fucking Love. I said it in the preseason. I said it in the offseason. I said it even when he was struggling earlier in the regular season. The Packers don't miss on quarterback, guys. Like, it's not just Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Don't forget your Packers quarterback history with Don Magic Man Mikowski and the likes of Lynn Dickey back in the day. They were both successful, above average, good NFL quarterbacks. They were not elite Hall of Famers. Not everybody is. That doesn't mean you can't be a competent, good to great even starter in the NFL. Compared to your peers, you may not be elite Hall of Fame, but you can still be in the Hall of Very Good. You know what I'm saying? And whether or not Jordan Love ends up a Hall of Fame quarterback is still yet to be determined over the next 10 to 15 years. But as far as right now, he is succeeding in what is essentially his rookie season, because he did the Rodgers thing where he redshirted all those years behind Rodgers. And so, yes, it is an advantage. And yes, it does help that he's been with the team and knows the offense and is able to process and make plays in tight windows, even though he has a collection of just completely inexperienced talent around him. All the tight ends, all the receivers are under, have 2 years or less experience in the NFL. Even the running backs, you talk about AJ Dillon is in his third year. Aaron Jones is really the only veteran presence that they have on offense outside of like the offensive line. And he's been kind of in and out of the lineup. So, Jordan Love is succeeding in spite of a lot of things. Now, unfortunately, Christian Watson got injured with the hamstring again after finally, starting to put it together for the last 2 games and being the number 1 wide receiver. So that sucks for a couple of my teams. It sucks for fantasy. It sucks for the Green Bay Packers also. But the one thing I will say is Tucker Kraft, who I had said last week was a high priority tight end waiver target for me, especially in tight end premium leagues. He had 3 for 6 for 37 yards. Not the greatest, but hey, it's outdoing a lot of Kyle Pitts weeks. But ultimately, I think he could now have even more opportunity if Christian Watson's going to be out. And, with Musgrave on IR. So just keep an eye on Tucker Kraft's ascension towards the end of the year. We've already seen a lot of these breakout tight ends this year with the Laportas and the Kincaids and the McBrides of the world. Kraft could end up being a sneaky addition down the stretch. The other big thing I would say I was really right about my top 3 streaming defenses. I absolutely hit on Atlanta and the Chargers. Those were number 1 and number 2 for me, and number 3 hasn't played yet. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars playing tonight, so we'll see how that goes. But if you played either Atlanta or the LA Chargers, you would be very happy. They both dropped depending on what league format you're in, they both dropped 20-ish or 20-plus fantasy points. They were excellent streaming defenses. They were 2 best ones of the week besides the Indianapolis Colts, who had like the random 2 blocked punts, including 1 for a touchdown. So that's not something you would normally count on week to week, but the ones that were predicted, they still hit. They were number 2 and number 3. So Atlanta and the Chargers defense. And next week, it's go right back to the well, just play against the New York Jets. Houston Texans going to be my number one waiver ad. I can already tell you that. They're going to be a priority for me on defense. Adam Thielen. This one is season long and right now because I said to draft Adam Thielen on as many teams as you could, but you were never supposed to hold the bag this long. So if you still have Adam Thielen on a team, that's, I'm sorry, but that's your own problem. I said in the preseason, I said it before when he was being overlooked. This is Tyler Lockett syndrome of I expected him to be the veteran presence for that team, for a young quarterback, whether it was him or if it ended up being Andy Dalton, it was even better, which we saw. But the fact that it was Bryce Young, I was assuming with Bryce Young being a rookie quarterback, wanting to rely on a veteran presence, especially on first down reads, meaning when it's third down and or red zone, that he would look to Adam Thielen first. That's what we saw earlier in the year. Haven't seen as much of it lately, and especially now with this coaching change, we saw a lot more Jonathan Mingo this week. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. But Adam Thielen, a la Tyler Lockett, as I've done so many years, who's perennially undervalued. You draft him, let him go off for 6 weeks on your roster to get you that early season boost, and then trade him away for max value before the ceiling drops out, which it is prone to do with Tyler Lockett and Adam Thielen. This happens like every fucking year with Tyler Lockett. So if you were left holding the bag on Tyler Lockett or Adam Thielen, I'm sorry, that's just, that's why you got to be willing to trade and kind of trade at the height of their value, which would have been between week 6 and week 8. So you could have probably got a lot for Adam Thielen. I traded, and I feel like I didn't even get enough. I traded Adam Thielen and Devin Singletary to get Tyler Boyd when T. Higgins was hurt, and Jerome Ford, who I really like down the stretch, especially now with the Stone Pony Joe Flacco. It's looking like that could be back to as good of a play as I thought it was going to be, especially with the defenses they have lined up down the stretch. But that's getting away from just the fact of you needed to trade Thielen or Lockett at the height of their value, which would have been around week 6 to 8. So if you were still holding the bag on Adam Thielen, I'm sorry, but he was still an excellent draft pick for where you got him, which was in the double-digit rounds. And speaking of Alvin Kamara, the fact that anyone questioned whether Alvin Kamara was going to be the number one running back over Kendre Miller or Jamal Williams is still hilarious to me. The fact that he was being drafted as late as the 9th, 10th rounds earlier in the preseasons or in the offseason if you were doing your drafts early on. But then, as it kind of went later, people started to kind of pick up on that. And I started seeing Alvin Kamara creep up to like the 5th, 6th rounds. And yeah, it seemed obvious to me from the start that he was never just going to lose that job. And now he's right back into being basically an RB1 that you were able to pick up in late middle rounds. So tremendous value. And he's still a stud in the core of the Saints offense. Even if it's Jameis Winston playing, like Alvin Kamara still has great value. And then this one doesn't really give me a lot of pleasure to say, but one of the first videos I ever made on this channel was how would Bijan Robinson be a bust? And I had basically laid out that if you were going to take him in the first round, especially if you were going to be bullish enough to take him above a CMC or, any of the wide receivers after Justin, like if you took him above Tyreek Hill, how fucking stupid does that look? And that's an absolute possibility, especially in like a startup dynasty. I could absolutely see that being a pick that someone made. It didn't happen in every league, but there were definitely leagues where it happened. But just the fact that it was first round draft capital, and even in redraft, if it was second round draft capital, it just hasn't been there. And the fact that, he's had 7 weeks under 15 fantasy points, 2 of them were flat bust under 10, including that weird sick game where he just like wasn't available randomly. But it's like he's been a bust for fantasy in terms of his draft capital exclusively. Yes, he's had, I think, 2 top 5 weeks on the entire season through 13 weeks. And he had 2 good weeks wrapped around the bye, but then the bottom fell out because he didn't get a touchdown and it had a gross, inefficient day. However, there is a light at the end of this tunnel for him because he has a crazy good schedule coming up at Carolina after the Tampa game, which is this coming week, weeks 15, 16, 17. So for your fantasy playoffs, at Carolina, home against Indy, at Chicago. That's creme de la creme. The only one that I could see potentially disappointing would be Chicago because their run defense has had better days as of depending on the game, but they can also be had, and I can see him getting them through the air too. So I think that's a really good schedule for Bijan. I do see him being an RB1 down the stretch still. So you are still going to play him. Now, next week is going to be a tough run defense. I would still play him, but maybe temper my expectations. But then I would be very excited if I was able to make the playoffs and Bijan was still on my roster because I do think he could be a potential league winner given that matchup. And now we get into my favorite segment of the week of the show. Who scored more than Kyle Pitts this week?
Who in the blue hell are you?
So this week, Kyle Pitts went 4 for 51. So in PPR leagues, Brevin Jordan, come on down. You're the next contestant on Who Scored More Than Kyle Pitts. And bringing with him is Chig Okonkwo, who has had almost no relevance all year, but could be a sneaky waiver ad. Kyle Granson, not my grandson. Taysom Hill, the Swiss Army knife. Harrison Bryant, the other Browns tight end. Jakey Ferguson. And in standard scoring, his own teammate once again has outscored him. And no, it was not Jonnu Smith. It was Michael Pruitt. He said, that's my touchdown for Michael. And that's who scored more than Kyle Pitts this week. It's so stupid, but it's just like, fuck Arthur Smith, right? That'll bring us right into the hearts and farts. So we'll actually just run through these pretty quickly. Quarterback, Purdy-licious. From the Thursday game, Geno and Dak. Stafford, Love, Hurts, Tua, Russ. Minshew Mania coming from nowhere. I didn't think he would actually come through, but he did. The old Stone Pony, Joe Flacco, has been the best Browns quarterback for the last decade, probably, which is hilarious to say. Jared Goff still managed to get it done. Sam Howell and Stroud also were hovering right around 20 points. For the running backs, Alvin Kamara, the Yeti, Derrick Henry, he took a huge hit and ended up in concussion protocol. He might not play this week coming up, which would be fine unless you just really needed him to get into the playoffs. But if you were already set to go to the playoffs, you're fine if he takes this week off as long as he's coming back fully healthy for the double Houston matchup in weeks 15, 16, 17, wrapped around, I think, what is another good matchup. So, yeah, really excited about that. But, yeah, he had a great game before he got knocked out, and he would have had probably an even bigger game. Devon Achane also came back. Achane, I don't know how you say it. All I know is he gets it done every time he's on the field for fantasy. This man only needs like 10 touches, and he is dominant. James Conner got his revenge on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chuba Hubbard has fully taken that job over from Miles Sanders. Christian McCaffrey continues to dominate. Isaiah Pacheco had a good game. Kyron Williams, Rashad White, Tony Pollard, and Charbonnet both had good games on the Thursday also. Jerome Ford wasn't good on the ground, but he got it done through the air and got a touchdown thanks to Joe Flacco. And I love the fact that Jerome Ford is kind of a toolsy running back that's going to get a lot of opportunities now through the air because of Joe Flacco. I think Joe Flacco settling the Browns is the best thing that could happen for Jerome Ford and even Kareem Hunt. But specifically for Ford, I love it going forward. Ty snap percentage Spears. He took over for Derrick Henry after he got knocked out of the game. He should be rostered 100% at this point, even though he's not my favorite. He's definitely going to be fantasy relevant. And all handcuff running backs at this point should be rostered, especially if you happen to have like the player. Like this is the time to go find your handcuff and make sure that you pick them up and roster them. Zeke took over for an injured Ramondre and kind of got it done in a gross way, just barely. And then Opportunity and Mostert both scored. For wide receivers, Debo, he had a huge game. 3 touchdowns. There's 2 through the air, 1 on the ground. DK Metcalf dominated on Thursday, 3 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill continues to petrify defensive backs around the NFL. Absolutely just smoked Washington for 2 long touchdowns. Nico Collins had a monster day and made me really regret trading him in one of my dynasty leagues where I was desperately needing a running back. But it's like I only had Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, and I traded Nico Collins, Rondale Moore for Jerome Ford and a 4th rounder. And even though Jerome Ford scored, and I think he's going to help my team more down the stretch, it feels bad when you make a trade like that, and then the player that you trade away just suddenly explodes. But yeah, Nico Collins had a monster game. Luckily, I still have him on a few other teams. CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans. Actually, let's pause there for a second. I've seen people question whether or not he's a fucking Hall of Famer. 10 straight. The man's never not had 1,000 yards in a season, and he's a former Super Bowl winner. So to me, he is definitely in the Hall of Fame. He should be first ballot, in my opinion. Christian Watson, that one sucked because he's got the hammy. Puka Nacua, he's dealing with the ribs now, but he had a monster game. Both of those guys on my Scott Fishbowl team, so that's part of where I got that juice. Also from Alvin Kamara and Devon Achane. But also Puka has a rough matchup next week at Baltimore. So if he is dealing with injuries and that matchup, I might literally have to consider benching him. So that could be some sketchy territory. It'll really depend on what options I have available to me. But yeah, that's a tough one. Michael Pittman, Devonta Smith, Alec Pierce. I thought it was going to be Josh Downs on this list, but no, Alec Pierce came in and stole his work. AJ Brown, Nuke, Cortland Sutton had a long touchdown. Olave, Cooks, Cooper Kupp managed to get in the end zone and save the week because it was looking pretty bad. Brandon Ayuk also found the end zone, as well as Deontay and Amon-Ra. Both Amon-Ra unusually quiet because it was a huge Sam Laporta game, but he still managed to get a touchdown, and so he didn't have a dookie week. Speaking of Laporta for the tight ends, Laporta dominated, was the number one tight end on the week, and Trey McBride was right behind him. You also had Jake Ferguson. You had Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill almost had an even bigger week because he almost had a touchdown from the one, but then it got like called back, and then it was Alvin Kamara vultured it from him for once. So that was nice to see. And then Harrison Bryant just from out of nowhere. And even though it was rough, Travis Kelce, it feels like a bad game, but 4 for 81 from your tight end spot is even in half PPR, that's 10 points. Even in standard, that's 8. So that's not a bad game from your tight end spot. But it's not what you expect from Travis Kelce, especially if you took him in the first round, especially as high as 106, which I saw in a lot of leagues. So that maybe should go in the fart list, but to me, it still felt like he deserved a little bit of a heart, especially in a losing effort like that at Green Bay on the road. Colts, Chargers, Falcons, mentioned them all three before. They dominated on defense, as well as the Dolphins and Texans were both good as defensive plays as well. And Texans, like I said, number one priority next week. They're going to be facing those lowly Jets. And speaking of the lowly Jets, who have been kind of a fart all year, we get into the farts.
Just hit the pillow. See how you feel.
There's your fucking pillow.
Feel better?
Yeah, I do.
So in the 15-point club, Patrick Mahomes, it feels extremely disappointing whenever he has only 15 fantasy points, but that's what happened. Baker Mayfield and Kyler also only 15 fantasy points, despite the huge day from Mike Evans. It all went to him, and Chris Godwin's touchdown ended up being a rushing touchdown, so Baker Mayfield did not get those points, unfortunately. And then Kyler Murray also same thing. Only had, even though it was they won that game, it was 2 rushing touchdowns from James Conner, only 1 for Kyler Murray. Derek Carr got hurt again. Will Levis is not a thing. Kenny Pickett is not a thing, and he got hurt again. And Justin Herbert, that was probably the most concerning one. But I already talked about the offense earlier. When it was that segment of what I got wrong, just the Chargers offense in general, it has been rough goings for them, difficult to watch. So just in general, Chargers across the board are going to be on this list. Running backs, Austin Eckler looks like he's running with a fucking anchor around his neck. Bijan, only 12 points. That was the same amount as Antonio Gibson and A.J. Dillon, basically. Najee Harris didn't score. They ran him out of fucking shotgun on the goal line, which I literally can't take watching this offense anymore.
Pain.
And, that drop is just as relevant for Breece Hall and the Jets. Devin Singletary's dead with Dameon Pierce back. Dameon Pierce had 15 carries to Singletary's 8. So you don't drop him, but you move on from it as a play. You got to get him out of your lineup probably. Zach Moss, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a guarantee. You got to get him in the – no, he's not a guarantee. He is he had a good beginning stretch of the season. He had some good games. He is capable of putting up duds. He is not Jonathan Taylor. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, that one is concerning. Seeing Jahmyr Gibbs revert to the early season work usage where they're just running David Montgomery for 1 to 3 yards consistently, that kind of hurts. And especially Gibbs almost had the touchdown, and then as soon as he didn't get in and it was like short yardage, they were like, oh, my opportunity. It's the Jamal Williams syndrome all over again. So, Jahmyr Gibbs, you still got to play him because he's explosive and he can have good games anytime, but you also have to just kind of brace yourself for the potential of these bad games. And then, DeAndre Swift, had a rough outing. Ramondre Stevenson got hurt, and it's high ankle sprain, so he's probably done for fantasy purposes. And then, Samaje Perine continues to be irrelevant, even though I thought that was potentially a flex play against the Texans. It really didn't work out. Wide receivers. Quentin Johnston is just like hilariously like the embodiment of Chargers gonna Charger in terms of a wide receiver draft pick and how he's played this season. But Jalen Waddle, Tyler Lockett, Jerry Jeudy, Chris fucking Godwin scored a rushing touchdown, but had no catches, and he was still sub 10 points, even with the rushing touchdown. It was the only play he had the whole game. He's just not involved. It's all Mike Evans. Garrett Wilson he cannot overcome the likes of Tim Boyle and even Trevor Siemian. The fact that it's egregious what they did in terms of not going out to get a real backup quarterback that they could have traded for at any point during the season once Aaron Rodgers went down. Aaron Rodgers went down at a time when Anthony Richardson was still healthy and looking good. They potentially could have maybe swindled the deal for Gardner Minshew. Obviously, Josh Dobbs was available. They could have traded for Josh Dobbs. Joe Flacco looked better than any Jets quarterback has looked all year. The fact that they didn't just keep him, so many things. But yeah, it's bad. It's bad all around for the Jets. Amari Cooper can't, even Joe Flacco couldn't keep Amari Cooper relevant, but I think it was because he also got injured in the game is what it was. Adam Thielen, it's dropped off. Josh Downs, this was the really disappointing one, but it really just was because Alec Pierce showed up and had a random day, so it is what it is. Everything else went to Michael Pittman, who is absolutely the target hog there. Jahan Dotson, and then Terry McLaurin on the all cardio team, and he fucking said as much because he was pissed. But I can't blame him. He's like the best wide receiver on their team, and they just don't use him. Jaden Reed as kind of a flex play. I was deciding between Greg Dortch and Noah Brown in one league. They both sucked. Tutu Atwell I thought was a deep flex. That didn't work out. And Drake London just continues to be the other high-end Falcons player that is just completely irrelevant in an Arthur Smith offense. For tight ends, the Muth had a really disappointing game. Pat Freiermuth. David Njoku got usurped by Harrison Bryant, who made the Hearts category. Hunter Henry continues to be irrelevant. He had 2 good weeks, hasn't been relevant since. And it's because Bailey Zappi isn't much better than Mac Jones, quite frankly. That offense is just shot. You can just avoid the Patriots the rest of the season. Honestly, Zeke is a waiver ad because of injuries and necessity, but beyond that, I really don't even want him or anything to do with this Patriots offense. And Logan Thomas throwing it back. He had a bad game and was kind of irrelevant. And for defense, the Rams, just because someone had mentioned to me as a streaming option, the Rams defense, and I was saying no, Falcons, Chargers definitely above the Rams. Rams ended up being sub 10. The Browns did enough to get that fantasy defense points down. The Eagles, they ended up losing the game big to the 49ers. So if you tried to just roll with the Eagles still because you're an Eagles fan, that was a bad idea. Titans, Lions, Steelers, all were kind of potential borderline streaming defenses, and they all failed. They were all sub 10. That is it for the Hearts and Farts. We'll quickly slam through some waivers here for week 14 because it's such an important week, and then we will get on out of here. So week 14 waivers, we got bye weeks, just the Commanders and Cardinals. So who are we picking up for our waivers?
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
All right. Jordan Love is going to be facing the New York Giants and has been playing extremely well. If he is still on waivers, you're going to want to pick him up. Minshew Mania lives to tell the tale and will be facing the Bengals on the road. Bengals defense isn't that bad, but I could see, the Colts winning that matchup because it's Jake Browning on the other side, and the Colts are trying to get into a playoff spot and have the potential to do so. And then Joe Flacco versus the Jaguars. Jaguars defense is pretty good, but I could see Joe Flacco just getting the ball out really fast. He had 12 targets to another Browns that's going to be on my list after this, Elijah Moore. But yeah, I think Flacco might be a decent add. So, and I'm talking like there's super flex leagues where, I had to decide between Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett, and I should have just gone with Joe Flacco. So that's kind of the level that I'm talking about. For running backs, Antonio Gibson is going to be a must add if he is out on waivers because of the injury to Brian Robinson and the hamstring. To a lesser extent, you can add Chris Rodriguez. However, neither of them are going to be available this week because of the bye week. If you're in a shallower league and Tyjae Spears is still out there for some reason, he should definitely be owned. But for running backs, like this is handcuff season. You want Rico Dowdle, Elijah Mitchell, hell, even Michael Carter, you want to have stashed if you're the James Conner owner, because now DeMarcado is out. So, just it's handcuff season. If you have one of these workhorse running backs, you want also to have stashed the backup running back just in case. If you have the room, like if it's a super shallow bench of like only 4 or 5 players, and you just can't fit it, okay, fine. But in most leagues, if you are the Tony Pollard owner, you should have Rico Dowdle on your bench. If you're the CMC owner, you should definitely have the Elijah Mitchell. You should definitely have Elijah Mitchell on your bench. So, this is that time of year. This is the last week now before playoffs start. If you are already in the playoffs, this is the time to start managing like those kind of plays of like even looking ahead to, okay, who are the defenses playing next week? Let me pick up my streaming defense this week so that I don't have to be fighting for them on waivers next week. Let me get my handcuff running backs this week so I'm not trying to pick them up if my guy gets hurt. Those kind of moves are the moves you want to make now to prepare your roster for that playoff run. Excuse me. For wide receivers, Elijah Moore with 12 targets is a must add with Joe Flacco under center. He was using him like heavy, and Amari Cooper continues to be banged up. Devontae Parker saw 9 targets, and he could be a sneaky ad if you still insist on starting a Patriots player. And Zeke also, I forgot to mention in the running backs, he should have been there, is definitely going to be an ad with Ramondre Stevenson missing time. But I don't want either of these guys in my starting lineup heading into the playoffs. But you can stash them. If you're just really like super Patriots fan, or if you're just desperate, you're in a deep league, I could see it. I had the league where I mentioned I traded Nico Collins away for Jerome Ford because I only had Derrick Henry and Kyron Williams, and now there's a possibility that Derrick Henry is going to miss. If you're in a situation where you're 0 RB and you only have 2 running backs and one of them's going to miss, Zeke's there on waivers, go get Zeke. And then Jonathan Mingo saw 10 targets. And if that trend continues, and again, I always like to kind of look for these rookie wide receivers that haven't done much during the beginning of the season. Jalen Hyatt was the other one from last week that I had mentioned as a stash, even though he was on a bye. If they kind of start having the late rookie breakouts, those are valuable to have on your fantasy team. Whether or not you're using them actively in your lineup, you are keeping them away from lower seeded teams teams with injuries that might be looking to use those players as plug and fill options that could end up going off. So the more of those you play, keep away from the league in a way that you're not like playing against outside of the rules, I guess, like the better. So you want to stash a Jonathan Mingo and Elijah Moore, and even to a lesser extent, a Devontae Parker. For tight ends, Chigo Okonkwo, it's 11 targets over the last 2 weeks. It's still really gross, but hey, all the tight ends are pretty gross, so just maybe keep an eye on it, especially in tight end premium leagues. I might be forced to play him in Scott Fishbowl next week. We'll kind of see how that goes. Tyler Higbee at Baltimore. Higbee, you can't rely on him. He kind of comes and goes, but I feel like in matchups where they have to face these really hard defenses, it always feel like it's stupid Tyler Higbee ends up catching a touchdown in those games. This is very much just me thinking like real life football of like, okay, well, the Ravens are really good, but maybe like Higbee sneaks out and ends up getting like a random touchdown. So that's kind of if it's a desperation play that I'm looking for, I like him over, the Cade Otton finally didn't get his 8 points. He goosed. A play like, Tyler Conklin on the Jets or something like any of those kind of really low level options. I would go with the shot on Tyler Higbee. And the one I really like, it was the same last week. Tucker Kraft saw 6 targets. And if Christian Watson misses time, I think that could actually continue to grow. He could continue to see 6 to 8 targets. And for the tight end position, he could end up having a late kind of rookie tight end breakout window. So that's just something to keep an eye on in deeper leagues. I have him stashed in a couple leagues. Just kind of want to see how that goes, especially because we saw Musgrave breaking out already. And, between Musgrave and Kraft, they were profiled kind of like Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews when they were coming out, but it was Kraft who profiled more similarly to Mark Andrews, where Musgrave profiled more like Hayden Hurst. So I'm not saying they're exactly like those players, but it does mean to me that Tucker Kraft has receiving potential, especially if now you're going to eliminate Christian Watson from the offense for the next couple of weeks. On defense, I've already mentioned it several times. Texans at Jets. That is number 1 this week. I'm playing against the Jets rest of season if I can. Next up for me is going to be the Steelers. I'm going right back to that well because they are facing the Patriots and it's a home game. So I expect them to kick the shit out of the Pats, whether it's Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones, does not matter. Now they're going to be down Ramondre Stevenson, who is their best offensive player. I don't see how the Pats win this game. So I'm going to take extra joy in the fact that it's my team whooping up on the Patriots, who I've always hated. So Steelers on Thursday night, that's absolute lock streaming defense. If they're on waivers or if you have them, make sure they're in your lineup. And the Packers, we just saw them take down the Chiefs. And next week, they're going to be at the New York Giants against my boy Tommy DeVito. Hey, I'm on waivers over here. I had to fucking sneak that joke in. But I like Packers defense against Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants. And then kicker Jake Moody for the San Francisco 49ers. If he's still out on waivers, he shouldn't be. He should definitely be owned by some team somewhere. And it's a good matchup at home against the Seattle Seahawks. Riley Patterson for the Detroit Lions is going to be at Chicago. I can see them putting up a few more field goals there. And Will Lutz. You want to get Lutz? Let's get Lutz. The Denver Broncos kicker, formerly of the New Orleans Saints, still playing for Sean Payton, will be at the Los Angeles Chargers. They have a good defense, but I think the Broncos will do enough to get field goals. It's a divisional matchup. I like that to be a heavy field goal game, so I like Will Lutz in that matchup. That's it for me. That's it for Monday Mayhem. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, special announcement, we will be moving to live shows for the rest of the fantasy playoffs starting this Thursday. Mondays, Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come in and join the circus on some of the live shows. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I will catch you guys on the flip side. And we ended off with my favorite shout out, the list of Joker. You just made the list.
You just made the list.
You just made the list! Oh my God. Just made the list! Those stupid soccer mom's hair! You just made the list!
reporting her neighbor, who's ex-Catholic by her demand, and Larry's supposed to talk to. Well, she doesn't know what to do. She says we shot for him for Colleyville. Says she hates me ever since I arrived. Says I'm not allowed to go unheard. We got to a beat to challenging in court. That I will not be an occupant of an assembly hall in her state. They're there to say that she's having fun. Not with yet this policy. That's Liver says she's moved in. And that she just, she don't want the challenge. Here we go. She plays with Pittsburgh Steelers. She wants no Bowling Green in Ohio. That's bad luck, but she wants someone else. Here we go. Here we go.